This is Mike Robotham, and first and foremost, I'd like to welcome all of you to the third installment of our three-part webinar series on State Soil Scientists and the Soil Science Division moving forward together. You'd think I invented the title, I should remember it. This is our third one, and what we're going to focus on today is TSS, and I've entitled the presentation Working Together and Sharing What We Do. I'll be doing, for better or for worse, probably the most of the talking today, but I do have able assistance from two counterparts. First off, Roy Vick, who many of you have worked with over the years in various capacities. Roy now has the title of Associate Director for Operations for the Soil Science Division. Basically, we call Roy the chief herder of cats, that he's in charge of all the regional offices and keeping things running. So Roy will be here to chip in and provide some comments along the way.
And good morning or good afternoon, wherever time zone you're in.
And then the third member of our team today is Jason Nemecek. Jason is the state soil scientist in the state of Wisconsin. And Jason will be chipping in later in the webinar to show off some tools that he and some others have been working on to make TSS reporting less painless for all of us. And one of the things that we'll talk a lot about today is the importance of reporting TSS and telling the TSS story. And Jason and his colleagues, the computer guys, we call them, they can do that kind of stuff. I sort of know how it works. But they've developed some really neat tools that can make all of our lives easier as far as how we get the word out on the great work that's going on. So without further ado, I'll get started on the presentation. So we'll click over here to the screen. So what are we going to talk about today? First off, we're going to talk about what technical soil services is. And when I talk to people, there's some confusion out there, I think, about what kind of activities constitute technical soil services and what don't. So we'll run through a few quick little examples to make sure we're all on the same page. We'll talk about the current status of technical soil services and state and soil science division collaboration. We'll talk a bit about the results from the FY 2016 report. I haven't run the 2017 report, but we'll talk a little bit about 16. We'll talk about some ideas for coordinating activities moving forward. We'll talk about that's a typo. Sheesh, in my first slide, there's a typo. Those are actually the FY 2017 reporting deadlines and requirements, so we'll talk a bit about that. And then Jason will show off some of the new graphical reports that will help us better tell other folks what we're doing. So what is technical soil services anyway? Technical soil services are activities that focus on supporting the use of soils information. And we've got some classic examples there. So we talk about support for conservation planning, providing soils-related information and training, and the classic and probably the most fun for many of us are all those activities related to youth education. If you're trying to figure out whether what you're doing is TSS, look at the primary purpose of the activity. Start there. If the primary purpose is new data collection, then it's not TSS. Now, most of this new data collection is done by staff from our soil science division, but state soil scientists and their staff may participate in these sort of activities. And we hope they do, because as you learned in the first part of this webinar series, states receive an allocation from the soil science division. So if you're asked to help and you're able to help, be present. Go to that field, attend that field review. Go to that on-site demonstration, that sort of thing. In converse, if the primary purpose is to improve existing data, it's not TSS. So water table studies, that sort of thing. Keep in mind, it's not that any of the stuff is any more or less important. It's just which box we've got to report it in, that's all. If the primary purpose is site-specific application and evaluation of data, then it's TSS. So most of what you do as a state soil scientist or as a resource soil scientist And a significant fraction of what Soil Science Division staff do is this application of data. So that could be an on-site evaluation. That's a compliance determination. If you're disseminating data, so you're providing a map, you're helping someone access Web Soil Survey, that's TSS. If you're educating people, so are you working with kids? Are you at the county fair? Are you doing any of those things? That's TSS. There is, of course, one exception to all of these generalizations regarding data collection. Because of how the terms are defined in NRCS, NRI, which most of us would agree is a data collection activity, is actually TSS. And if you want the long and convoluted explanation of why that is, you can call me and we'll talk offline. But a lot of history and not necessarily a whole lot of logic, but we won't go into that. What about meetings? Unfortunately, most of us spend a lot of our time going to meetings. Go back to why you're at the meeting. So is the purpose to discuss the collection of soils and ecological site information, and it's not TSS. So the management team meeting, the technical team meeting, those aren't TSS. And again, as we mentioned earlier in this webinar series, Soil Science Division provides explicit support in the form of a budget allocation for state soil scientists and resource soil scientists to attend those meetings. And you need to be there. It's not, that's the time to talk about what's important. That's the time to talk about what needs to be done. That's the time to talk about how to get it done. Well, a whole lot easier to do that at the beginning than to try to fill it in after the fact. And again, if the purpose of the meeting is to discuss the use and application of ecological site information or soils information, then it is TSS. And so, for instance, our Soil Science Division staff, if they attend the state TSS planning meeting, they can claim that time as TSS. That's them helping out the TSS program. There's a lot of confusion out there, some misunderstanding about the role of the Soil Science Division in providing TSS, and let me provide a little bit of history of how we got where we are. As part of the Soil Science Division, and Roy corrected me, it was not a reorganization, it was a
restructuring.
It was a restructuring. So pardon, I messed that up. Right? So that's why Roy's here. Okay. Roy's here to keep me honest. You know, that's the whole point. It was agreed that SSD staff would continue to provide TSS support to the states, even though they weren't working for the states anymore. A national target, and I stress, there's a reason why that word's in all caps. It's a national target of 15% of total Soil Science Division FTE. Support for TSS was established at that time. That number was based on the CODA, the 01 allocation provided to the Soil Science Division at that time. This was not carved in stone tablets sent down from the Whitten Building or the Washington Monument. It was not codified in policy. However, the former and the current division director have affirmed this as a goal for the division every year. And that includes last year, FY 2017, and our current fiscal year, FY 2018. So what happened last year? And this is last year, 2016. We'll run the 2017 report here in a bit. Everybody kept doing TSS, which was great. The number of activities was a little bit down year over year from FY 2015, but not a whole lot. I think we've kind of reaching maybe some sort of equilibrium as far as what's going on out there. So we'll see what happens in 2017, but I'm not worried that we went down, that our raw numbers went down a little bit. The key activities remain the same, technical consultations, on-site wetlands, all those sorts of activities that we continue to do. By hours, you can see that the graph shifts around a little bit to emphasize those activities that frankly take more time. So you see on-site wetland determinations kind of in the upper right-hand quadrant jumps up as a relative percentage because that's something that typically takes a couple hours at least, oftentimes the better part of the day. Whereas things like technical consultations, which are often over the phone or via email, drop down as an amount of time because they're typically shorter duration. as you can see, this is the infamous bar chart. This is the same one you received in that email that went out and in the written report. TSS is all over the map as a state level, and the relative support provided by Soil Science Division and state employees ranges greatly. There are a number of reasons for this that we'll talk about in a minute, but the important thing is that people are getting work done. Similar story for ours. Won't dwell on these graphs because you probably can't read them anyway. So, some broad observations based on what I've just thrown up there on the screen far too quickly. As I mentioned, overall TSS, the overall amount of TSS being done, and in particular Soil Science Division support for TSS assistance varies greatly by state, and I'm pretty confident by areas within states. And there are a number of reasons for that. First off is different levels of workload. We all know that different states and different parts of states have different levels of TSS. If you're in a place with a lot of federal land, not a lot of farm bills going on, you're out west in a dry area where there aren't a whole lot of wetlands, well, there may not be much demand for TSS from anybody. State staff, SSD staff, anybody else. That may not be a key part of your workload. But on the other hand, if you're in a Midwestern state with a bazillion farm bill contracts and prairie potholes as far as the eye can see, then, you probably got pretty high TSS workload. And that's reflected in the TSS reported. There are different levels of state staffing. Some states are fortunate and have large numbers of soil scientists on their staff. State soil scientists, assistant state soil scientists, resource soil scientists, soil health specialists, have a wide variety of people in the soil science discipline on the state staff. Other states, very frankly, aren't so fortunate. We have a number of states, and far too many, in my opinion, that have one soil scientist on their staff, and typically the state soil scientist. So obviously that makes a difference. And different levels of SSD staffing. That Soil Science Division offices are not equally distributed geographically throughout the United States, nor is the staff in those offices equally distributed geographically across the United States. So again, don't look at the bars too close. It's a very individual situation. I can say that on a national basis, Soil Science Division is providing less than the 15% FTE informal target level of TSS. It is. Now, whether it is. Just leave it at that. There is a major caveat. You've probably heard this in numerous discussions before, and you're going to hear it from me 2 or 3 times before this talk is out, that as far as we're concerned at the national level, if work is not reported, it doesn't exist, because reports are all we got. And so I know there's great work going on out there that I don't know about. No denying that. But if work was done but it wasn't reported, it doesn't exist. I can't report on what I don't know. So, we've laid out what we got, laid out where we are. Where do we go from here? The bottom line and the take-home message from all of this talk is that we as soil scientists in the agency, whoever signs our paychecks, need to work together to support agency priorities. And technical soil services is one of the major ways that soil scientists in NRCS support agency priorities. That's just what it is. There is lots of work out there to be done. And there's lots of work out there to be done, and fewer of us to do it. And that includes soil scientists on state and area staffs, that includes soil scientists on the SSD staff, at all levels, at the field level, at the regional level, at the national level. As your national guy, your guy in Washington as it were, I am going to appeal to your blatant self-interest in this regard. That if we as soil scientists want to remain employed by the agency and remain appreciated by the agency and remain supported by the agency, we need to show the folks that make the decisions that soils information is important. And that includes everybody from the chief, all the people, as Roy and I euphemistically refer to, the people upstairs. We sit on 4th floor of the federal building. The chief and his entourage are on 5th floor. And if they aren't buying it, then we got a problem. So we need to show those folks in your state. If you're working in a state, it's that person who sits typically in the corner office with the nice window. In most state offices I've worked in, look for the office with the window because that's where you'll probably find the state conservationist. And they're the person who needs to understand that soils are important. So when it comes down to hiring that new person, it comes down to replacing that retirement, soils is at the table. Because we know what happens if we don't do this. If we don't make this case, there are going to be fewer resource soil scientists. There are going to be fewer soil science division staff, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not meaning to be alarmist here, but we need to tell our story. We need to let people know what we do, why we do it, and why it matters to the agency. Now, in most places, in spite of all these issues, in spite of dwindling staff numbers, in spite of this reporting to different bosses, state and soil science division staff are working together smoothly and stuff is moving forward. And that is great. That is what we want to see. But Roy and I get a lot of phone calls. And some of those phone calls are about TSS. And up there on the screen is a random assortment of calls that I've gotten over the past few months. Roy has gotten similar. Roy was looking at the list this morning and said, yeah, those all look familiar. I've changed names and obfuscated appropriately. So the point is not to point out anybody, but the point is to show that all is not rosy, that we've got work to do. That communication, which is the key to all of this, isn't necessarily happening and isn't happening as well as it could. So, given that mostly things are going good, but we got some problems, what do we do now? First thing we need to do is we need to know what work needs to be done. Because it's awful hard to plan if you don't know what work needs to be done. And you've heard me say this, if you've been at my webinars before, you've heard me say this at pretty much every state soil scientist webinar where we've talked about TSS. And that's that you as a state soil scientist, with the assistance of the right folks on your staff, or people who aren't directly on your staff but you work with, you need a state and a local work plan. And that's not for me, it's not for Roy, it's not for the chief, it's not for your state Connie, but it's for you. You need to know what you and your staff are going to be doing, because you need to estimate that workload. What's going to need to be done over the next year? Where is it going to need to be done? When is it going to need to be done? It's going to need to be done. Can it be done in the winter? If you're in a place where there's 4 feet of snow, there ain't a whole lot of outside work you're going to be doing in the winter, short of snow survey. Down south, you got a little more flexibility, but there may be some timing issues. This has to happen before that. This can only happen in the spring. This has to happen before the crops are planted. So those sorts of things. You need to identify priorities. I just spent a bunch of time talking about how we got fewer people. We got less money. Well, that means we can't do everything. So we better figure out what's important and do that. Because if we're going to take the time, we better do the stuff that matters and do more of the stuff that matters and less of the stuff that doesn't. having a plan helps you identify and allocate resources. Maybe you need help from the SRC. Maybe you need help from the grazing specialist. Maybe you need help from the division. You need help from the soil science division. But you need to identify and allocate those resources. And we understand that plans change. Stuff happens. I mean, I'm sitting across my desk from Roy, and headquarters is the ultimate place where stuff happens. And all of a sudden, what you thought you were going to be doing for the next 4 hours is not what you're doing for the next 4 hours. We understand that. But that doesn't mean that we don't have plans. That doesn't mean we don't have priorities. And I think the same is true whether you're a state soil scientist, whether you're an area resource soil scientist, whether you're a soil science division regional director. Get that work plan put together. And then communicate it. Don't put it together and stick it in a file. Put it together and share it with people. Tell your staff about it. If you're a state soil scientist, share it with the regional directors who have responsibility in your state. Share it with those MLRA soil survey offices. Share it with your state con. Perfect thing to discuss. We got some performance plans coming up for 2018. Perfect thing to walk into that performance plan meeting with your state con with, hey boss, here's what my plan is to be doing this year. Regular communication, understanding, and flexibility are essential. And that's hard. I'm not saying that's easy. A lot of us, I'm as guilty as the next guy, like to know what we're doing tomorrow, and it's stressful if something weird comes up and those best laid plans go out the window. But it happens. A lot of us like to do our own job, and I got to go to another meeting, I got to be on this other committee, I've got to be in this other task force. But if we're not communicating what we're doing, what we plan to do, and why it's important from day one of the fiscal year, not just on day 364 of the fiscal year when we're doing that final report, we're not going to get anywhere with this. Our goal in the Soil Science Division is that we want to keep communication at the lowest level. And you look at this little chart here, that what we want to see happening with TSS is that that the state and local staff are working with those MLRA soil survey office leaders. That they're the folks who are talking with each other. They're the folks who are talking about these workload. They're the folks who are talking about what needs to be done by when. That's where we want that communication to start. And ideally, we got a bunch of smart people, smart, dedicated people who want to do the right thing. Ideally, that's where it's all good. Now you see the upward arrows with the little CCs by them. I was a state soil scientist. I like to know what my people were working on. Soil survey regional directors, they want to know what their people are working on, so that's what CCs are for. Keep people informed. It's never a bad idea to keep your boss informed. You'll never really get in trouble with keeping your boss informed. And the state soil scientists, the soil survey regional directors, and the state soil scientists, as it's not a one-to-one correspondence by any means, need to be talking. And not just talking when there's a management team meeting, but talking when there's a chance to talk. And not necessarily just when there's a problem, but talking about opportunities, talking about possibilities. Those open lines, if those communication lines are open, you head problems off at the pass. Or you catch little problems before they become big problems. Don't underestimate the value of a phone call. Email is great stuff, and I use it a lot myself, but email can be, frankly, evil. That it's easily misunderstood. You've got no body language, you've got no context, you've got no nuance. And you can go down an awfully deep rabbit hole on email when a 5-minute phone call would have stopped the whole thing right in its tracks. So don't forget that we all still got phones, usually a couple of them. And then elevate only if there are issues. Yeah, if the local folks can't work it out, then the bosses need to get involved. We understand that. That happens sometimes. Nothing wrong with that. Priorities change. People need clarification. People need to figure out what's more important. That's fair enough. We understand that. But let's make that the second or third place, not the first place to go. So, the moment you've all been waiting for, the 2017 annual report deadline announcement. Drum roll, please.
2017.
2017. This is 2017 reporting. That is reporting for work that was done on or before September 30, 2017. It is indeed that time of year again, and I will be running the national report on All Saints Day, which is November 1. Therefore, your deadline to report everything is, cue the spooky music, Halloween. If it's not in the database by Halloween, it's not going to be in the report. So don't say you weren't warned. I wish you had like some, like a evil laugh thing or something, evil laugh gimmick, app or something. Yeah, see, Roy's got the blah for us, So after I've given this pitch about the fact that you need to report your stuff by on or before Halloween, why report your TSS? Well, if you work for Roy and you're an SSD employee, then this is a really easy answer.
No.
You report your TSS because Roy told you to. It's required. But you ask, but I don't work for SSD. Why should I report my TSS? Well, you should report for a number of reasons. First off, you should report because we work for a big government agency, and the reality of working for a big government agency is that work that isn't reported didn't exist. And whether that's TSS, whether that's Farm Bill, whether that's whatever it is, work that is not reported someplace did not exist. And me at the national level, state soil scientists at the state level, need to know and show what is being done. And we talked about this earlier, but we need to do that to justify the importance of and support for soil science at all levels of the agency, from those resource soil scientists typically working out of area offices, to our state soil scientists and assistant state soil scientists, to our regional staff, to our tech center staff, everybody, all and sundry. And I think that and Jason's going to talk about some of his experience in Wisconsin in a little bit, but I think if you talk to a lot of state soil scientists who have promoted reporting by their staff, you'll find that a lot of them say that it's been a really valuable piece when they walk into the state con for that performance appraisal meeting and the boss says, "So what have you been up to?" And, funny you should ask. Here's my report. Here's all the stuff we've done. Here's why it's important. That's where we get the support. That's how we continue to be relevant. And the bottom line is you did good stuff. There's a lot of great stuff. Every time I talk to anybody in the field, I don't care who you work for, anybody in the field, and I ask them what they've been doing. And it's one of the fun things about, I get to spend too much time in this big ugly building here on 12th and Independence, but one of the fun things about getting out in the field talking to folks is you get talking to folks and asking them what's going on. And there's an amazing amount of stuff going on out there that people are doing that's helping out people, that's making our soils information better, and it's getting the word out about soils information to help people make better decisions. And that's what we're all about here. We're not gathering soils information. We're not sticking it into NASAS. We're not getting up on Web Soil Survey for it to sit there and for us, and pat ourselves on the back about what a nice job we did. We're putting that information out there so that people can use it to make better decisions. That's what we do. It's our job. Helping people help the land is the old slogan of the outfit. And we're a piece of that. So what do you need to report? This is in 17 different places, including multiple places on the SharePoint. But the absolute minimum reporting criteria for national is the date completed, When did you finish it? That gets us in the right fiscal year. The TSS activity type, that's a pull-down menu. The instances, how many times did you do this thing? So you can pool things. People have said, well, do I have to report every 15-minute phone call? Well, no, you don't. Report it as a batch. You did 20 this week. Put a start date and an end date, 20 instances. The total hours. So keep that in mind, that it's not the hours per instance, it's the total hours. So if you report all 20 of those at once, it's not 20 at 0.25, it's 20, and I'm going to trust that you can do math, and that took you roughly 5 hours. Again, this is not keeping track of every 5 minutes. Ballpark it, folks. It's a national report. Your username is there automatically. The recipient is a pull-down list. That's a real broad category of people. Program benefited, same deal. You'll notice that benefits all programs went away. That's very deliberate. The agency has redefined benefits all programs that only applies to administrative stuff. That does not apply to technical support in any form. So the admin officer does 64T, you don't. And TSS is not 64T. If you're not sure where to put it, it's Conservation Technical Assistance. And then your state. And that's the state where you did the work. Keep in mind, not the state where you hung your hat. That's the state where you did the work. So if you're working out of an MLRA SSO survey office that's near the border and you're working across the state line, report the state where you did the work. If you're a generous state soil scientist who's helping out your colleague in the next state over to get some work done, report the work in the state you did the work. There are resources to help. There's a somewhat dated but still perfectly valid YouTube video, and you can get your dose of the now retired and I think positively happy, having fun with his grandkids, Paul Fennell. There's an updated helpful hints document on the TSS SharePoint site. If you can't find the SharePoint, or if the SharePoint somehow doesn't want to give you access, just if you can't find it, talk to me. If you need access, and if you get in and it says you can't get in, just respond to a little email. It'll give you a box that says, why do you need to get in? Just write a little note that says who you are, and the webmaster types will get you in lickety-split. And for those, I've talked about this in several previous webinars, but there is a spreadsheet that can be used to record TSS and then import it into NRCS. I know a number of people are already using that spreadsheet. That was developed by Kevin Godsey down in Missouri a couple of years back. That is also available on the SharePoint. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Jason. He's going to talk a little bit about some work that he and some colleagues have done to develop some reports that will help us tell the TSS story. So Jason, you've got the floor.
Thanks, Mike. Hi, everyone. I wanted to share a report that I've been working on. I had it listed under the master list reports. It's the first report under the technical soil services. The link's on the slide, but if you click on the master list, you'll be able to find the report. There's four different interactive graphs where you can kind of show some information of how what's going on in your state. I've been using it for, the reason why I built this is I've been using it to work with the public affairs specialist to help sell what's going on in our state. Wisconsin is the fourth highest wetland determination workload in the nation, and the research soil scientists have been doing wetlands, and this is a way for me to get to show people in the state that these are the things we've been doing and working on. And the report's easy to generate different types of graphs and show what's going on. I've been using this for like yearly cooperative soil survey updates. I have a book that I publish each year with the public affairs specialist, and so far it's been working. Next.
Jason, can you say a little bit? I've got the graphic up with the national report that has some of the graphics. Can you maybe mention a little bit about that one as well?
Sure. So the map is the number of instances, and I've broken another graph down below where it's incidences and hours, and it's broken down by region, retired, or state. If you hover over the states, it'll tell you the number on the report.
Okay. Well, folks, I'm going to jump back, folks, to show you to jump back to that URL just so you can see that. And this, as with all of our webinars, Sean will be putting this up on this will be up on the web in a little bit, so that this will be accessible to you, and you can, and you'll be able to. I know it's hard to get these things when you're just on a, on a slide, when we're just seeing something on a slide. But one of the things that Jason mentioned, and I wanted to highlight, and I see we even have a question about this from in our little question pod over here, and that is one of the things that Jason, I think, has done a marvelous job of, was he walked down the hall and bothered his public affairs specialist. And what he found out was that his public affairs specialist was looking to do her job. And her job was helping people get the word out about NRCS. And so he was able to work with her. He's not a graphic design expert by any means, but she is. And so he was able to work with her, get her technical content, and develop a really nice annual report that he was able to provide to his state conservationist, to the partners, highlighting the various things that are going on in Wisconsin. And I think the question is about the national level, and to answer the specific question that was asked, yes, we are trying to build those relationships with the editor, to work with the editors, and to work with public affairs. We're fortunate that we think we have it looks like we have we've just been assigned a presidential management fellow from the public affairs office. Her name is Elizabeth, I believe, right, Ryan? Our public affairs person?
Yes.
Her name is Elizabeth. And she has been assigned to work with Soil Science Division. So we're hoping to make very good use of her and exactly what the questioner was talking about, which is help us better tell our TSS story using things like social media, infographic type products. One of the things that I think would be very productive to explore, and Paul Reich on our staff has done a little bit of this, and he has actually been, I think he actually took the story map development training, and to look at how those, how we might be able to use that new tool. That's I believe that's an ARC product out of the Esri stable, but that's another way that we can spatially associate things that are going on. So one of the things we're looking at with the FY 2017 report, maybe to do something like that, to develop some of these interactive products. So I just urge you, and based on Jason's experience, and feel free to contact Jason directly about his experience working with public affairs. But I think, in your own state, if you haven't had a chance to chat with your public affairs specialist, take the time. And you might be surprised about, you may have support in-house that you didn't realize you had. There's one last item that I'd like to cover before we jump into to questions, and that's the annual soils data refresh. As you are all aware, the staging server has closed. My understanding from the folks at NSSC is that virtually all surveys, after a little bit of trouble, not to belittle the stress and strain for folks, but that all surveys, I think we were under a handful. And one group that's obviously missing is Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. They kind of have other things on their mind at this point. But outside of those guys, I think we were under 5 that in the end weren't able to be posted for various reasons. which when there are 3,700 nationwide, isn't bad. The new FY 2018 Surgo is scheduled to go live on or about November 1st, assuming no major hiccups in Fort Collins. It was a tough year, and the biggest thing I want to do is I want to thank everyone, and that's everyone, state soil scientists, resource soil scientists, if you were involved, SSD staff. We had computer issues. We had, you name it, it happened. But it got done, and a special thanks, I don't think she's probably on the line today, but Tammy Cheever at the center there deserves major, major kudos for herding the cats and making sure this all got done. So if you have a chance to thank Tammy, please do so. Moving forward, we got through this year, but this isn't sustainable for man nor beast, and certainly not for Tammy. So what we're doing is we are in the process of forming a small technical team to review the poll process and make recommendations for next year and beyond. Some folks have already volunteered to be considered as members of that team. If you are interested, please contact me offline. We'll be working we want to keep that team small. We want to make sure that it's a diverse representation of people's jobs, locations, experience levels, etc. But if you want to put your name in the hat, feel free to do so and drop me an email. Double check with your supervisor, obviously. You should always do that before you volunteer for anything. And then drop me an email letting me know, and we should have that team announced here within the next couple of weeks. With that, I was informed by Amy that she has graciously offered to host the next State Soil Scientists meeting. So for those of you, we haven't had one since Roy and I were trying to remember. We're thinking South Carolina in 08 or 09, so we're long overdue. And I'm happy to take any questions.
All right, Mike. Well, we've got some people composing their thoughts, entering a question. I'll go ahead and ask one. Just a clarification on what qualifies as tech soil services. And you'd mentioned improving existing data. What if somebody was improving an existing interp, or maybe it's more correct to say customizing an interpretation for their area? Taking national interpretation, customizing it for their state. Is that tech soil services or not?
That is indeed tech soil services. Because that's taking the soils data and interpreting it, applying it, using it to inform decision making. So
whether it's an existing national interpretation, new interpretation, I consider all interpretations as use of soil data and therefore technical soil service.
Yep. What he said.
If you can hear me. I'm not near his phone.
All right, we got a couple of questions in here we can take. So from Glenn, any attempts to ask assistance from either the division editors or state public affairs staff to help us better tell our TSS story using things such as social media or infographics type products?
Yeah, I tried to answer that a little bit kind of in the course of the talk, but yes, that is definitely the plan. I mentioned that we do now have a public affairs person with a portion of their time directly devoted to us, and her name is Elizabeth. I forget what her last name is. I've met her. Roy and I are both going, Elizabeth what? We both met her. She's just getting started. I think she's been on board. Maybe a couple of weeks tops. You know, she might be getting paid. She's probably not even getting paid yet, knowing how slow they are to process paychecks. So, but we're hoping to work with her moving forward. And yes, there's huge opportunities there. There's a great editorial staff, as many of you know, affiliated with the division, based kind of throughout the country, and so yeah, that's definitely something we want to leverage moving forward. So, and if you have ideas about how we can do that better, we're all ears.
So a question regarding the deadline for reporting tech soil services. Any thoughts to changing the date of the deadline? Because sometimes tech soil services aren't, evenly distributed throughout the year. So what do you think about a later cutoff, like November 30th for the tech soil services deadline?
Marty, no. I really can't, what the problem is, and I did a bad job this past in 16. My goal is always to get the national report out the first of the year, because we want to be able to report in a timely manner on work that was done. I understand workload. I mean, I completely understand workload. And I'm reading the question here from one of our folks, and yeah, I mean, I understand. I mean, life happens, and you get tied up in things, and I completely understand that. I pushed it back to October 31st this year. We can certainly, I do the best you can, but the bottom line is that part of the problem last year was that the report came out way too late. The 16 report came out way too late, and we need to get that report out sooner rather than later. And if that means we miss some stuff, we miss some stuff. One of the things I would urge you to do is either by using the spreadsheet or by just, the more you can report sort of, soon after you do it, whether that means that you maybe carve out a little time every other Friday. You're going to take a couple hours Friday afternoon, and you're going to do your time sheets. You're going to approve your staff's time sheets, and you're going to sit down and enter your TSS over the year so that you're not stuck with a huge laundry list of things at the end of the year. It's a tough one, and I understand that. And basically, do the level best you can, and keep in mind you can always run another report. My deadline is for the national report, but I know at least a couple of states this year, because of some issues with deadlines and some staffing turnover and things like that, they were unable to meet the national report deadline, so their numbers didn't look as good in the national report, but they took the initiative. They made a state level report that the state soil scientists could take into the state con and say, hey boss, I know we don't look so great on the national report, but here's what happened, here's what we did, and here's this customized state-based report. And the report that Jason just showed you, which does some of those graphics for you automatically, makes that even easier. So yeah, do the best you can by Halloween, and if we're really short on Halloween, I might push it back, but I really don't want to go much later than that if I don't absolutely have to.
All right, Mike, another question about the staging server. Can we leave the staging server open year-round?
That's a darn good question, and not one I am qualified to answer. But I think we do, what we want to do with this review team, with this, not review team, but with this technical team or whatever we're calling them, to look at this whole refresh process is to make sure that they have all the options on the table and can recommend a procedure that makes the most efficient and effective use of folks' time, and maybe an ability to and leaving the staging server open for a wider window may be part of that. There may be reasons why that can't happen. I'm not qualified to say. So
and there are always exceptions. If there's egregious errors in the data, there were mistakes or something, we can open things up. If the regional director gives the thumbs up to it, and it could be reposted at any time during the year.
And I see somebody's put in the chat that the staging server is open now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so it is open all year. Thanks, Sky. Thanks to Sky for chipping in from someone who actually knows what they're talking about. And thanks also to Steve Campbell. If you folks look in the chat window, Steve has graciously put in the URL for the TSS SharePoint site.
So, Mike, another question on what's considered TSS. Is the refresh considered TSS?
Is the refresh considered TSS?
Oh.
No, the refresh is the data itself. So actually the refresh from a state soil scientist perspective is considered part of that service that you provide to the soil science division. So it's part of what your allocation's covering.
And I see that Sky put in there that if the staging server is open year-round and it comes up there are new interpretations, you have to redo what you already processed. So it could be self-defeating. You may have to do things more than once, it sounds like, to make sure you have the current interpretations loaded.
Well, and that's, again, one of the things we want to ask this team to look at is, what are the benefits, pluses and minuses? When do we want to put cutoff dates for instance, for new interpretations? Are we going to establish a cutoff date that, any new interpretations need to be in by July 1 to be included in that October refresh? We want to put we got a lot of smart people in this outfit. We want to employ their skills and knowledge to give us and management some recommendations about how to do this better next time. And like I say, if you got good ideas, just let me know. And we'll be sure to circulate those team member names to folks so that you have people to contact. Once we get that team set, we'll provide names and contact information so that you can contact the team directly.
All right. Well, thank you, Mike, Jason, and Roy, for your time and effort to make this presentation. And thanks to all the participants for joining in. We had well over 100 people join in today's webinar. And we'll get the on-demand recordings of this and the other two parts posted to our National Soil Survey Center YouTube channel within a few business days in case you want to go back and review that information. And this concludes our webinar presentation.